des vies, des changements concrets que les Mauriciennes et les Mauriciens vont ressentir dans leur vie, dans leur recherche d'emploi. Des milliers de personnes attendent ce moment depuis trop longtemps. Madame la Présidente, quelque part à Maurice aujourd'hui, une personne s'est rendue à un entretien d'embauche. Elle était préparée, elle était qualifiée, elle était prête, mais elle n'a pas obtenu le poste. Non pas parce qu'elle manquait de compétences, non pas parce qu'elle a échoué à l'entretien, mais à cause de quelque chose qu'elle a fait il y a 15 ans et pour laquelle elle a déjà payé, pour laquelle elle a purgé sa peine et payé peut-être une amende. Quelque chose qu'elle a depuis longtemps laissé derrière elle. Mais son certificat de moralité en a décidé autrement. Et la porte s'est refermée. Et ce n'est pas un cas isolé. À travers toute l'île, la même scène se répète dans des foyers, des régions et des vies différentes. Le résultat est prévisible. Le rejet, l'humiliation, l'exclusion. Non pas parce que cette personne représente un danger pour la société et qu'elle a récidivé, mais parce qu'un système conçu pour protéger le public est aujourd'hui détourné de sa vocation et est utilisé pour stigmatiser définitivement des personnes, pour les marquer comme inaptes bien longtemps après qu'elles aient démontré le contraire. Ce n'est pas de la justice. C'est une double peine. Et c'est une peine qui frappe de manière disproportionnée les jeunes, les plus démunis, et les rend incapables de s'en sortir. Et les conséquences ne s'arrêtent pas à l'individu. Elles se propagent. Les familles en souffrent. Lorsqu'un parent ne peut pas trouver du travail à cause d'une condamnation ancienne, ce sont les enfants qui en payent le prix. La suite, on la connaît. Précarité, instabilité et le sentiment que leur famille est, d'une façon ou d'une autre, marquée par l'État comme étant inférieur. Madame la Présidente, ce projet de loi est une avancée concrète et soulagera des milliers de personnes qui ont besoin que la société leur accorde une seconde chance. Ce projet de loi vient corriger une situation injuste avec proportionnalité et humanité. D'abord, il prévoit que certaines condamnations mineures, sous condition et après un délai déterminé, ne figurent plus sur le certificat, permettant ainsi une véritable réinsertion. Ensuite, il consacre un principe fondamental. Une personne ne peut être discriminée à l'embauche pour une infraction sans lien avec l'emploi concerné. Madame la Présidente, s'il est vrai que ce projet de loi modernise notre justice et ouvre de nouvelles perspectives, il est tout aussi vrai que notre devoir est de protéger les plus vulnérables, ceux qui sont sans défense, c'est-à-dire les enfants. La protection de l'enfance reste notre priorité absolue. Cette modernisation que nous apportons ne se fera jamais au détriment de la protection des enfants, bien au contraire. Et je salue le fait que ce projet de loi maintient avec fermeté l'obligation de faire apparaître sur le certificat de moralité toutes les condamnations liées à des infractions graves commises à l'encontre d'enfants, notamment celles prévues dans le Children's Act 2020, l'abus sexuel, la prostitution d'enfants, le grooming, la pornographie enfantine et l'enlèvement d'enfants, entre autres. Ce choix est fondamental. Il traduit une volonté claire et non négociable du gouvernement. Aucun compromis lorsqu'il s'agit de la sécurité, de la protection et du bien-être des enfants. En ma qualité de ministre responsable de la protection de l'enfance, je suis particulièrement attentive à la cohérence entre le Certificate of Character Bill et le Children's Act 2020. Ce dernier établit un cadre robuste pour la protection des mineurs. Le texte présenté par l'Attorney General vient renforcer ce cadre en s'assurant que les informations pertinentes demeurent accessibles chaque fois que la sécurité d'un enfant est en jeu. Madame la Présidente, nous ouvrons une porte, certes, mais nous ne baissons pas la garde. Madam Speaker, let us be clear. Mauritius is not reinventing the wheel. We are catching up with a global movement that has recognized for well over a decade that permanent criminal records are bad for individuals, families, and society. Across the world, jurisdictions are embracing what is now widely known as clean slate legislation. In the US alone, more than 19 states have now enacted some form of automatic record clearing. Pennsylvania was the first in 2016. New York followed suit in 2024, automatically sealing misdemeanor convictions after 3 years and felonies after 8, recognizing that a person's past should not determine his or her future when he or she has demonstrated rehabilitation. Across continental Europe, the principle is universal. Justice must include the possibility of redemption. And the evidence is compelling. Studies consistently show that post-conviction employment dramatically reduces recidivism. When a person finds work, they are far less likely to reoffend. Conversely, when employment is denied and the door is permanently shut, despair sets in and the cycle of marginalization continues. And the economic argument is powerful. Cost-benefit analysis indicates that clearing criminal records produce net benefits for society through increased tax revenues, reduced dependence on social assistance, and lower costs to the criminal justice system. In a small island economy like Mauritius, every working adult matters. Every excluded citizen is a cost to all of us. Madam Speaker, as the Minister responsible for family welfare, I want one and all to understand that the damage done by an uncleared criminal record is never confined to one person. When a parent cannot find a stable job, children grow up in financial precarity. When a young person is repeatedly rejected by the job market, the risk of radicalization, substance abuse, and further offending arises. When families are trapped in poverty by the administrative stigma of an old conviction, the entire family unit is destabilized. These are the families that have recourse to our services. to our family support services. These are the stories our social workers hear every week. Madam Speaker, this bill will not solve all our social challenges, but it removes one major unnecessary barrier that has been crushing the potential of too many of our citizens. For the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family Welfare, this is not merely a criminal justice reform. It is a family welfare reform, a social cohesion reform. My thoughts goes to those young persons who have had an issue with the justice system, who have served their time and rebuilt their lives, but who keep on being excluded from the formal economy. Their families depend on their ability to find a decent job. This bill gives them that opportunity. Madam Speaker, we believe in second chances and in the capacity of human beings to change. We believe that justice must be proportionate and that a society which permanently excludes its own citizens from economic life is a society that is failing itself. Madame la Présidente, ce projet de loi est mesuré et responsable. Il n'efface pas les condamnations graves, ne diminue pas les droits des victimes et n'ouvre pas la porte à l'impunité. Ce qu'il fait avec discernement, c'est reconnaître que pour les infractions mineures, après qu'un délai suffisant se soit écoulé et que la réhabilitation ait été démontrée, l'État doit permettre aux gens d'avancer. Nous sommes une petite société. Nous ne pouvons pas nous permettre de mettre définitivement de côté le potentiel humain et nous permettre le coût social de l'exclusion. Et nous ne pouvons pas, en toute conscience, continuer à maintenir un système qui punit les gens, non pas pour ce qu'ils sont aujourd'hui, mais pour ce qu'ils étaient il y a des années. Je vous remercie.
Merci. Honorable Subro. Yes.
Madam Speaker, this House is debating a critical piece of legislation. What we are debating today is deeply rooted within our own harsh history. This bill aims at transcending the contradiction of the inherently inhuman history of our own society, a history of class exploitation, class bias, class prejudices, and control. Today, we are heading towards a significant rehabilitation of all those from the lower class who have been victims of humiliations, prejudices, harassment, just because they were part of the working class and the poor layer of our society. How many of them have been denied an employment, promotion, just because they could not produce this piece of paper, which were asked by the employer class? How many of them have been compelled to endure hardships just because they could not have this piece of paper or have convictions for which they already paid for, dated back several years ago, written on this famous piece of paper? Madam Speaker, given that many honorable members articulately address the social reintegration dimension of the bill, for not convicting a second time somebody who has been duly and legally paid for his sentence, I fully align myself to their views. For my part, I will contribute to the debate by highlighting the historical and class dimension of the issues being raised and addressed by this bill. Madam Speaker, many eminent historians consider the practice of requiring documents like a certificate of character, formerly the certificate of morality, to be a legacy of our colonial control systems, which directly followed the abolition of slavery in Mauritius. While it is true that the modern certificate is a standard legal document, its historical roots in Mauritius are undeniably tied to the transition from slavery system to indentured labor and colonial legacy. During the slavery era, enslaved people were physically tagged or were subjected to various forms of identifications to maintain control and enforce property rights of slave owners. If they were found outside their boundaries, they could be arrested, punished, and or executed for marronage. Underwater archaeology near shipwrecks such as Le Courrier, wrecked in 1821, has yielded metal identification tags used during the slavery era. After slavery was abolished in 1835, the colonial government introduced vagrancy laws to ensure a steady supply of cheap labor for sugar estates. These laws criminalizes idleness and introduced the famous rogue and vagabond charge. If a formerly enslaved person or indentured laborer could not prove they were under a valid labor contract or outside their zone, they were arrested and as vagrants. To avoid arrest and secure employment, workers had to provide proof of their good conduct or morality to the new employers. This is the ancestral origin of the certificate of morality. This is what evolved into an administrative practice where the police or the director of public prosecutions verified that a person had not been a maroon or a vagrant. The Truth and Justice Commission argued that these requirements stem from the logic of surveillance, the afterlife of slavery, used to maintain a disciplined and moral workforce in a society where labor was once forced. Let me refer to a few of our eminent historians. For Dr. Vijaya Tilok, I quote, "Every economic system aims to find cheap and disciplined labor. Thus, the concepts of marronage during slavery and vagrancy during indenture both sought to control the movement of slaves and indentured laborers." Dr. Tilok adds, "Through vagrancy laws, the colonial authorities prevented free labor competition, whereby laborers would go around estates to assess which one had the best working conditions. The most substantial remnants of vagrancy heritage can be found in Grand River Northwest, where the vagrant depot lies. Legally, the concept of vagrancy still survives in the criminal code under the terms of idle or rogue and vagabond. Second, in Forbidden Freedom, the experience of vagrants at the vagrant depot of Grand River Northwest and other vagrants in British Mauritius, reference 1879 to 1905. Satyendra Priyatam, researcher at Apravasiga Trust Fund, notes that under colonial laws, a vagrant was someone with no valid pass, who did not have a permanent place of abode, or who was not working under a labor contract. Madam Speaker, the Mauritius Truth and Justice Commission concluded that contemporary discrimination, including class discrimination, is not an accident, but a direct legacy of the logic of control established during the colonial era to manage enslaved and indentured populations. Today, the certificate is framed as a security measure to protect workplaces. However, the debate remains that the high pressure to present a clean certificate for even basic labor reflects a historical distrust of the working class rooted in the colonial period. Madam Speaker, in 2006, the administrative practice inherited from our history for employers to for employers' clearance from the police or the DPP to verify that a person is clean was henceforth regulated. The Certificate of Morality Act was voted to make better provision for the issue of Certificate of Morality by the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. It was introduced by the then Attorney General and Minister of Justice and Human Rights, the then Honorable Ramapalaide. The law made the request to issue a certificate of morality a right of the person, not the employer, without challenging the very practice of employers requesting such certificate for employment purposes. In year 2012, a new law replacing the certificate of morality by the current certificate of character was enacted. Besides, for the first time, listing the various types of offenses which would appear on his certificate of character, the major feature of this law was the fact that the codification for the first time in our history of the very practice of employers seeking clearance certificate for their employees. While in the first law, the certificate of morality, it was the citizen who had the sole right to apply for such a certificate. The present law, which we are changing right now, introduced the principle of an employer applying for a certificate of character on behalf of a worker. Section 4(3) of the present law stipulates that an employer may, with the written consent of a worker, apply for the issue of a certificate in the name of the worker. Now, Madam Speaker, one might argue that the employer would need, with the written consent of a worker, but anyone who knows the world of work would agree that no worker seeking a job or a promotion from an employer would be in a position not to give such a consent. So it established a de facto power of employer to apply for the certificate. The present law is reminiscent of our slavery, indentured, and colonial history. It indeed reflects a historical distrust of the working class rooted in the colonial period. Before coming directly to the bill in this House, let me highlight a few fundamental facts. Or let me now move to the other side of the coin. If it was a practice for centuries till now for companies, employers to seek from someone from the working class to prove himself to be sound and certified with the correct morality or character, to have a basic right for employment, the same was not true and still to a large extent not applicable to the owner of capital, proprietor of local companies, or their designated directors. As if there is a superhuman privileged class, a subhuman class or social group in our society. In times of slavery, slave owners were considered superhuman and had nothing to justify. They derived the superhuman power from the Code Noir during the French period and from British slavery laws from 1811 to 1835. In times of indenture, the propertied class were considered as subhuman by the law, and other subhuman but subject to vagrant, idle, rogue, and vagabond laws. Madam Speaker, today's society still bear the scars of old days. This is the truth. This is our truth. For example, the company's law. No such clearance of a certificate of morality or character is needed for any shareholder or higher management of companies. True, Section 337 of the Companies Act 201 prohibits some categories of persons from managing companies, but it does not require a certificate of morality or character and offenses listed therein. True, in recent years, foreign companies, especially in financial sectors, are required a certificate of character and are subject to due diligence, but same does not apply for the quasi-majority of employers operating in Mauritius. The ethic of our laws are still class biased and class discriminate. It upholds that those who detain capital, the means of protection, even if they are rapists, misogyny, or criminals, are persons of high morality or character, while those who are from the working class, the poor and lower strata, are de facto potential criminal and stigmatized. Madam Speaker, let me directly come to the bill we are debating today. The present bill, while it does not eliminate the very principle of employers requesting certificate of character from an employee, nevertheless, fundamentally limits, alters, or even nullifies its application. First, the bill repeals the present section of the Certificate of Character Act, whereby an employer may, with the written consent of a worker, apply for the issue of a certificate in the name of the worker. This section is simply eliminated. Bravo, Honorable Attorney General. Second, the new bill introduces a significant proviso on the usage of the certificate of character by prospective employer. Section 4 on non-discrimination in employment provide where a person certificate of character specifies that he has been convicted of a crime or misdemeanor, his employer shall not discriminate against him whether victim or whether crime or misdemeanor is not related to the employment. Or B, his prospective employer shall not discriminate against him whether crime or misdemeanor is not related to the employment for which he is being considered. Third, the bill introduced not only non-discrimination clauses in the application of the certificate of employment, but the bill provides the mechanism for the enforcement of this section. In Section 12, consequential amendment, the Equal Opportunities Act is amended in Section 10, in subsection 1, by inserting where, subject to subsection 2, that a person's certificate of character certified that he has been convicted of a crime or misdemeanor which is not related to his employment or to the employment for which he is considered, thus reinforcing the application of the non-discrimination clause. Fourth, the bill fundamentally alters the very consent of the certificate of character by the very content of the certificate of character by substantially limiting the offences to be listed in the first schedule, eliminates small fines up to 50,000 rupees, and provides changes in line with a more human dignity considerations. Madam Speaker, I have focused my intervention and contribution to the debate on socio-historical and employment-related angle, given my trade union activist experiences. But I cannot, as Minister of Social Integration, not salute the twin fundamental dimension of this bill. That is the great qualitative leap forwards in terms of social reintegration of persons who already have paid for their convictions. A conviction given at a given moment in one's life can never be transformed in a form of life sentence by society. Let me again say kudos to the Attorney General, my colleagues of the Cabinet, to contribute to bring such a positive bill in this Assembly. It is this type of initiatives which make me and my party to be proud to be in this government. It is this kind of legislation which honors the hundreds of thousands of people who have voted for us in the last general election. To them, we owe our seat in this Assembly. To them, we are here to serve. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. And thank you for keeping the time. Yes, Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I will also try my best, even though I've never been known for someone who's a very good pupil when it comes to that, to sticking to time. So I rise, Madam Speaker.
Just look me in the eyes.
That is the dangerous part. You know, that is the dangerous part. You know. That would sidetrack me, please. So, Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this certificate of character bill. I have heard all those who have intervened before me, be it at the last sitting and today, and they have expatiated upon the very positives in this bill, the idea, the object, the philosophy. I shall not go into that much detail, but allow me to add the following. This is at its heart a bill about balance. Accountability matters, but rehabilitation also matters. Where a person has served his sentence, stayed within the law, and tried to rebuild his life, the law should not impose needless and indefinite obstacles to work and dignity. That is not leniency. That is justice properly understood. Crucially, Madam Speaker, this bill is not soft on crime. The FESH schedule still requires mandatory disclosure of serious offences, including murder, manslaughter, rape, child sexual abuse, child pornography, trafficking in persons, financing of terrorism, bribery, money laundering, and arson. Lesser and dated convictions may, in defined circumstances, no longer block a person's future. Serious offending remains visible. That is responsible lawmaking. So I commend the Attorney General for this excellent piece of legislation and the officers of his office. Now, Madam Speaker, I have listened very carefully to Honorable Subron, the one who preceded me, and he painted this historical picture of the source of the certificate of character. Allow me to say, and I'll add my little piece to it, if I may. So the very expression certificat de moralité comes from continental, specifically French, legal and administrative tradition. In French and Francophone legal systems, the long-standing instrument was certificat de bonne vie et mœurs.
Voilà.
A document attesting to a person's good conduct and moral standing. The Dictionnaire de l'Académie française defines it as a certificate attesting the good conduct and morality of an individual. In its original sense, this was not a criminal record. It was not a criminal record check. It was a moral attestation, often issued by the local official, a mayor, a parish priest, vouching for the good reputation, good conduct, and good morals of the person. In 19th century France, for example, the mayor delivered the obligatory certificat de moralité required for school teachers under Loi Guizot of 1833 and Loi Fallou of 1850. Now, in Mauritius, we inherited this concept through our French legal tradition, which survived the British takeover of 1810 in the form of the Code Napoleon and a deep base of French civil and administrative practice. The expression certificat de moralité therefore entered Mauritian usage from this Francophone administrative culture, even as the colony became British. I'd like to add on this historical part a doctoral thesis on Freemasonry in Mauritius from 1778 to 1950 records the following. By the 19th century, the certificat de moralité was used in Mauritius as a substitute for the casier judiciaire. The criminal record, Le Grand Orient, was informed that the certificat de moralité replaced the casier judiciaire in Mauritius. This is a crucial point. In Mauritius, the certificat de moralité fused two different ideas, the French moral attestation and the criminal record check, into a single document. So this is, for my part, a little part of history that I think it's important to put in context. However, there is something else that I hold very dearly, and allow me to share this. There is one further point, Madam Speaker, that the House cannot ignore. In Mauritius, as has been expatiated and gone in detail by many of my colleagues before me, a certificate of character, or then as it was known, a certificate de moralité, is required for many employment in the public sector. I've been on the website of the Ministry of Agro-Industry, I've spoken to the minister. You need a certificate de moralité, a clean certificate de moralité, it says, if you want un carte pêcheur. You need, yes, the website says that.
Tout dépend ce qu'on comprend par pêcheur.
Tout dépend ce qu'on comprend clean. Can you imagine what are we have to deal with? We are required, a certificate of character is required for a wide range of ordinary permits, licenses, modest jobs, a hawker's card, permis, marchand ambulant, an employment, even planteur. I mean, I would understand for those who were dabbling into the art of planting, but planteur, well, has nothing to do with what we were used to during the last regime of planting. That has nothing to do with it. Now, a general worker, a refuse collector, as was said by Honorable Babadi, you said that avec raison. Yet, allow me to say that the law as it stands today, for us in this assembly, it doesn't require a certificate of morality. No. So even if we are to commit an offense, not even before, but even after, or whilst we are in this assembly, and that offense has nothing to do with electoral dishonesty, that itself has a time within which you can enter the matter, and there is a limit, a statutory provided limit. We are the untouchables. I know. But if it is money laundering, if it is rape, if it is anything of the sort, the law does not provide that we can be disqualified while we're members of the House. So the question, therefore, has to be answered. And I say it because it's an opportunity to us to show that we are here for change, Madam Speaker. This is the mandate upon which we were brought to power, and we have not forgotten that. Why is it that we are to forget something so obvious? How is it, therefore, that the man that has to toil away, sweat, be the hawker, be the planter, be the fisherman, he has higher standards to adhere to, whereas us, lawmakers, we have no standards. That's a serious problem. So I call, therefore, upon my colleague ministers responsible for every single part there to look into this matter, because it has to be sorted out. So the most modest forms of work demand the cleanest records, while the highest legislative office is governed by far more lenient standard. That asymmetry is itself unfair, and this bill begins to correct it. So from there, we have to build upon it. A man seeking to push a hawker's cart, take to sea as a fisherman, or sweep our streets should not, Madam Speaker, face heavier lifelong consequences for entering an honest trade than a politician faces for entering this chamber. Fairness must begin where life is hardest, not where it's easiest. This is what I call change. That is what this bill does. It preserves disclosure for serious offending. It removes unnecessary obstacles for lesser and dated convictions. It protects youth offenders. It forbids irrelevant discrimination in hiring. And it brings a measure of justice to the citizens who have until now carried the heaviest burden of the present law. Madam Speaker, this bill is fair in principle, careful in design, and humane in effect. It is balanced, it is overdue, and it deserves the full support of this House. I commend the Certificate of Character Bill to the House.
Thank you so much. You're all doing so well. In terms of time, I mean.
Thank you.
Yes, Honourable Attorney General, I will again say it's time for your winding up speech.
Madam Speaker, last week, perchance, I learnt of the story of a gentleman now in his mid-40s and who works as an accountant in the private sector, but who has been plagued by a certificate of character exhibiting a conviction for simple larceny for which he was fined. The offence was committed when he had just turned 18, almost 30 years ago. With the advent of this new legislation, this gentleman will now, after such a long time, be able to hold his head high and apply for jobs he would never dream of going for, was it not for the novel provisions of the Certificate of Character Bill. Madam Speaker, this is the measure of the impact this law will have on the lives of hundreds, if not of thousands of Mauritians, cutting across generations, giving hope to people from all walks of life. Now, that being said, Madam Speaker, I need to set the record straight. I do not think that anyone has noticed it, but during my intervention 2 weeks ago, while setting out the conditions which will lead to certain convictions disappearing from a certificate of character, I said that in cases where the prison sentence did not exceed 5 years, that conviction would disappear after 10 years. That was obviously incorrect, as the bill provides that it is only in cases of a conviction which leads to a prison sentence of not more than 3 years that will disappear after 10 years. And of course, this is subject to that offence not being listed in the first schedule. Madam Speaker, the importance of this law, this other piece of the jigsaw puzzle we have been putting together for the past 16 months, has been underscored by the number of members of the House who have intervened. This House has heard from the leader of the opposition that he supports the principle underlying the bill, although he had qualms about the administrative problems that he says would ensue. He spoke of the impracticability of the process, presumably because the bill does not depict exactly how the process will work. Let me enlighten the House on this issue. You see, Madam Speaker, mindful of the fact that we are innovating and increasing the workload of the police and the office of the DPP, the bill provides at clause 7 the answer. It provides in that clause that the Attorney General may make regulations in consultation with the DPP to regulate applications for a certificate of character and to provide for matters connected and incidental thereto, not matters relevant thereto. In relation thereto, a term which I use here advisedly, as will become apparent in a few minutes, I have to inform the House that I have had consultations with the Director of Public Prosecutions and the Commissioner of Police, whom I met only yesterday, and we discussed the setting up of a clear process for applications. Although it will not be possible to draw strict timelines, we shall endeavour to make things happen in a transparent and effective manner. The regulations to be made will reflect this. As things stand, Madam Speaker, an application for a certificate is either made online or in person at the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions or at any of the divisional headquarters of the police. I'm informed that there are on average around, hear this one, 9,000 applications monthly.
Monthly?
A third of those are made online and the rest in person. Assuming the application is in order and the required documents submitted, there is a three-stage process which encompasses, firstly, a review at the divisional headquarters, secondly, a verification at the Crime Records Office of the police, and finally, a full assessment at the office of the DPP. Delays may occur, if applications are incomplete or contain inconsistent or insufficient information, or if a statement has to be taken by the police from the applicant. Now, for those who do not have a criminal record, I am told that the waiting time is approximately 4 to 6 weeks. For those who have criminal records, the process might take up to 3 months. However, we cannot and we should not close our eyes to the obvious surge of applications which will occur as soon as the law will come into force. And that is why we have provided that the law will come into force upon proclamation. That is, at a time when the system will be ready to take on the increased load. So much for the administrative process. Now, there are 3 other important issues, Madam Speaker, which must be addressed, lest people will be left in the dark. First, with regards to what the leader of the opposition has described as the structural ambiguity besetting clause 4 of the bill, non-discrimination in employment, he found fault with the terminology used in that, and so goes his argument, the words, quote, related to the employment is open to debate and is not defined well enough. But that clause 4, Madam Speaker, must be read in conjunction with clause 12, which deals with a consequential amendment to the Equal Opportunities Act. In the existing Equal Opportunities Act, section 10(1)(f, provides that no employer or prospective employer shall discriminate against another person where, subject to subsection 2, that person has a criminal record which is irrelevant to the nature of employment for which that person is being considered. So in the present bill, we have moved from a test of relevance to the nature of employment, which is, to my mind, subjective and rather wide, to one which is stricter. The words being now used are in relation to, connoting a more objective test of connectivity. And that is why I meant earlier on when I said in relation to was being used advisedly. Here, as in all laws, the balancing exercise is paramount. On the one hand, there is the need to afford adequate protection to the employee or prospective employee, and on the other, we cannot tie the hands of the employer altogether. Now, as I am on the Equal Opportunities Act, let me place on record that we are in presence of a paper from the Law Reform Commission, published late last year, entitled Strengthening the Powers of the Equal Opportunities Commission. Thereafter, the Commission was requested by the Prime Minister's office to give its views on this paper, and it did just that in December last. These are being looked at, and it will not be long before we come before the House with amendments to revamp the law in line with paragraph 9 of the Government Programme 2025-2029. The stated objective there, Madam Speaker, was and still is, and I quote, to ensure the principles of meritocracy and non-discrimination in employment are upheld, government will strengthen the powers of the Equal Opportunities Commission. This government, Madam Speaker, will thus honour another commitment it took and fulfil a promise it made to the people. Second, the Presidential Commission on the Prerogative of Mercy. The House has heard about Section 75 of the Constitution, and what ensued, unfortunately, can only be described as a méli-mélo, culminating with the first member for Constitution number 10, Montagne Blanche, Grande River South East, asking 4 questions which, if I may say so, are unfortunately based on an infelicitous reading of Clause 5 of the bill. Clause 5 of the bill, which is entitled Certificate of Character with no criminal record, provides for circumstances which may lead to a clean certificate being issued by the DPP. One of the set of circumstances provided for concerns a case of someone who has been convicted of an offence but who has already obtained a free pardon by the President, acting on the advice of the Presidential Commission on the Prerogative of Mercy. That person will be issued with a clean certificate of character, irrespective of whether the conviction for which he obtained the free pardon was one listed in the first schedule. That is what the law says, and nothing else. Now, That is clause 5.1b. Now, in contradistinction, clause 5.1c of the bill provides that the one who has been convicted of an offense and given an absolute or conditional discharge will not have a clean certificate if the offense is one which is listed in the first schedule. There resides the difference. To go back to the questions put by the honourable member, with due respect, they are irrelevant, being premised on an erroneous understanding of what clause 5.1b of the bill provides.
C'est compliqué.
Third, Madam Speaker,
Monsieur le ministre, c'est un peu compliqué pour les non-juristes. Honnêtement.
I am talking of the first amendment of Constitution number 10.
Yeah, yeah.
Third, Madam Speaker, previous convictions. The police is the authority which, through its Criminal Records Office, gathers and stores data relating to previous convictions. The question raised is, what effect will the provisions of this bill ultimately have on the criminal record of an individual? The short answer is none. Why? Because precisely the operation of the provisions of this bill is not akin to a free pardon, which is when your conviction is erased from the criminal record system, as if you have never committed any crime. The certificate of character is an administrative document which is issued according to the provisions of the law for non-judicial use. You cannot use same in a court of law. If someone has a clean certificate by operation of the provisions of this bill, the conviction and sentence concerned will no longer appear on the certificate of character. But should he, for example, commit another offense, the court will have to look at any of his previous convictions, including the one which no longer appears on the certificate, because it will still appear on the criminal record at the police. Madam Speaker, I hope I have cleared the air for all, especially for those who supported the bill in principle and agreed that it was a step in the right direction, but who nonetheless fell short of commending the bill, in sharp contradiction with the first member of the Constitution number 10, who candidly commended the bill to the House. With these words, Madam Speaker, I commend the bill to the House.
Now your motion has to be seconded. Yes, Honourable Minister of Agriculture is seconding the bill. The question is that the Certificate of Character Bill number 2 of 2026 be read a second time. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Committee stage.
Please be seated. Ali.
Clause 1, short title. Clause 2, interpretation. Clause 3, application of act. Clause 4, non-discrimination in employment. Clause 5, certificate of character with no criminal record. Clause 6, certificate of character with criminal record. Clause 7, application for certificate of character. Clause 8, protection from liability. Clause 9, offences and proceedings. Clause 10, regulations. Clause 11, repeal. Clause 12, consequential amendment. Clause 13, savings and transitional provision. Clause 14, commencement.
Question is that clauses 1 to 14 stand part of the bill. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
First schedule.
Question is that the first schedule. I'm sorry.
It has an amendment.
There's an amendment.
Madam Speaker, I move that the first schedule to the bill be amended as per the amendment circulated.
I've got two different briefs, that's why. Anyway, question is that the first schedule be amended as per amendment circulated. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that the first schedule, as amended, stands part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Second schedule.
The question is that the second schedule stands part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Third schedule.
Question is that the third schedule stands part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Title and enacting clause.
Question is that the title and enacting clause stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that I do report to the House that the Certificate of Character Bill number 2 of 2026 has passed the committee stage with an amendment. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Je garde celui-là, là. Honourable member, yes, you may take your seats, resume your seats. Honourable members, I have to report to the House that the Certificate of Character Bill number 2 of 2026 has passed the committee stage with an amendment.
Public bill third reading.
Madam Speaker, I move that the Certificate of Character Bill number 2 of 2026 be read a third time and passed.
Seconded by Minister of Agriculture. Yes, the question is that the Certificate of Character Bill number 2 of 2026 be read the third time and passed. Those in favour say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Motion.
Madam Speaker, I move for the adjournment of the House to Tuesday, the 12th of May at 11:30 a.m.
I'm just checking if if everything's fine. Yes? All right. The House stands adjourned. It's Tuesday next. Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé pour third reading?